Glad you're here. Tonight, we're diving into one of gaming's most fascinating villains, a man whose manipulation and betrayal helped destroy one of the most legendary outlaw gangs in the Wild West. Comment below to let us know where you're watching from, and if this helps you sleep today, make sure to like and subscribe tomorrow when you wake up. Now get comfortable, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin this journey into darkness. There's something uniquely disturbing about watching evil work. Not the cartoonish, over-the-top villainy of moustache-twirling bad guys, but the real kind. The kind that wears a smile, tells you what you want to hear, and slowly destroys everything around it. Micah Bell is that kind of evil. When he walks into the Vanderlinde gang's camp in the winter of 1899, he seems like just another outlaw. Rough around the edges, sure, but so is everyone. What nobody realizes is that Micah will be the infection that turns a dying gang's slow decline into a catastrophic collapse. Understanding Micah Bell means understanding how evil doesn't always announce itself with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it just walks into camp one day, acts friendly, and waits for the perfect moment to strike. Micah Bell comes from a family of outlaws. His father was a petty criminal who taught his sons that the world was divided into predators and prey. You were either strong enough to take what you wanted or weak enough to have it taken from you. There was no middle ground, no room for concepts like honour or loyalty or family. Those were just words weak people used to make themselves feel better. Micah learned these lessons well. His father was abusive and violent, and Micah internalized that violence until it became his entire worldview. Unlike Arthur Morgan, who was found by Dutch and Hosea as a teenager and taught to read, to think, to question, Micah was raised in pure cynicism. He never had anyone to show him that there could be more to life than violence and selfishness. The game reveals Micah's background through conversations and a newspaper article you can find. His brother tried to escape the family business, tried to live an honest life. Micah views this as betrayal, as weakness. There's a mission where you can encounter Micah's brother, and the contempt in Micah's voice when he talks about his brother choosing a different path tells you everything. Micah doesn't just accept violence as necessary. He embraces it as virtue. He's proud of being cruel, proud of being selfish, proud of being exactly what his father made him. When we first meet Micah in Chapter 1, the gang is already wounded. They're fleeing from a botched ferry robbery in Blackwater that left several members dead and forced them into the mountains during a blizzard. The Blackwater job was supposed to be simple: rob the ferry, take the money, disappear. But something went wrong. Dutch shot a girl named Heidi McCourt during the chaos. The Pinkertons were waiting. Gang members died, including Jenny Kirk and the Callender brothers. The survivors barely escaped with their lives, leaving behind a significant amount of money that they never recovered. The Blackwater money becomes a ghost that haunts the gang throughout the entire story. It's sitting somewhere in Blackwater, buried or hidden, representing everything they've lost and everything they're chasing. Dutch keeps talking about going back for it, about how that money will solve all their problems, how it'll fund their escape to Tahiti or Australia, or wherever they dream of going. But they can never get it. The law is watching Blackwater too closely. The Pinkertons know they'll come back for it eventually. That money represents the gang's past success and their current desperation. It's a symbol of how they're trapped, unable to move forward, but unable to let go of what they've lost. Micah wasn't there for the Blackwater job. He joined the gang a few months before, but he missed the disaster. This is important. He shows up after the gang is already desperate and vulnerable, and like any predator, Micah can smell blood in the water. The gang is fractured, scared, and looking for someone to blame. Micah positions himself as the solution, the loyal soldier who will help Dutch rebuild. The first mission with Micah sets the tone for everything that follows. Dutch asks Arthur to ride with Micah to scout ahead for a new camp location. From the very beginning, Arthur doesn't like him. The dialogue makes this clear. Arthur is curt, dismissive, barely tolerating Micah's presence, and Micah is trying too hard. He's complimenting Dutch constantly, talking about loyalty, making grand statements about the gang. It feels false, performative. Arthur sees through it immediately, but Dutch doesn't. During that first ride, Micah talks constantly. He tells Arthur about his philosophy, about how the strong survive and the weak perish. He talks about loyalty to Dutch, about how Dutch is a great man with a vision. He talks about how some people in the gang don't appreciate what they have. All of it is designed to drive a wedge between Arthur and Dutch. Micah is testing the waters, seeing how Arthur responds, looking for weaknesses he can exploit later. Arthur shuts him down, tells him to be quiet, makes it clear he's not interested. But the seed is planted. Micah has identified Arthur as an obstacle, someone who won't be easily manipulated. In Chapter 2, the gang settles near Valentine, a rough frontier town in the heartlands. It's a temporary camp at Horseshoe Overlook, a scenic spot with a view of the valley below. The gang is still reeling from Blackwater, still trying to figure out what went wrong. Dutch is making plans to get enough money to escape, to start over somewhere far away. Maybe Tahiti, he says, maybe Australia, somewhere the law can't reach them. But first, they need money. Valentine is a livestock town, full of cowboys, ranchers, and rough men. The gang starts doing small jobs, robbing homesteads, stealing horses, collecting debts. It's during one of these debt collection missions that Arthur contracts tuberculosis from Thomas Downs, a sick farmer who owes the gang money. Arthur beats him badly, and Downs coughs blood in Arthur's face. It's a moment that will define the rest of Arthur's life, though he doesn't know it yet. The debt collection mission is brutal to watch. Thomas Downs is clearly sick, coughing constantly, barely able to stand. His wife and son beg Arthur not to hurt him, but Arthur needs the money for the gang, and he's been taught that debts must be paid. He beats Downs mercilessly, and when Downs falls to the ground, coughing up blood, some of it splatters on Arthur's face. Arthur wipes it off, annoyed, not realizing he's just been infected with the disease that will kill him. The game doesn't tell you this is happening. There's no dramatic music, no cutscene highlighting the moment. It's just another job, another debt collected. But that blood on Arthur's face is a death sentence, and the tragedy is that neither Arthur nor the player knows it yet. During this time, Micah is constantly trying to prove himself. He suggests bigger scores, more violent solutions. When the gang robs a train, Micah is the one pushing to kill witnesses. When they encounter rival gangs, Micah wants to wipe them out completely. He's always advocating for the most extreme option, and he frames it as strength. Anyone who suggests caution is weak in Micah's eyes. In the early chapters, Micah is relatively contained. He causes problems, gets into fights with other gang members, makes racist comments toward Lenny and Charles, is crude with the women in camp. But he's not yet in a position of power. Dutch still listens to Hosea Matthews, his oldest friend and the gang's voice of reason. Arthur is still Dutch's most trusted enforcer. Micah is an outsider, a recent addition who hasn't earned trust or respect. So he bides his time, plays the loyal soldier, and waits. The strawberry jailbreak is one of the first times you see what Micah is really capable of. Early in Chapter 2, Micah gets himself arrested for murder in the town of Strawberry. The details are murky, but it seems Micah got into a fight with someone and killed them. Dutch wants him freed, so he sends Arthur to break him out. Arthur is reluctant. He doesn't like Micah, doesn't trust him, and doesn't understand why Dutch cares so much about getting him back. But Dutch insists, so Arthur goes. The jailbreak goes wrong immediately. Micah's plan, if you can call it that, is to just start shooting. Arthur picks the lock on Micah's cell, and instead of quietly escaping, Micah grabs a gun and starts killing. The sheriff, the deputies, anyone who gets in his way. Arthur tries to get him to stop, to just leave, but Micah is laughing and joking as he shoots his way through the building. He's treating it like a game, like the lives he's taking don't matter at all. The violence spills out into the street. The entire town of Strawberry becomes a war zone. Innocent people die. Shopkeepers, townsfolk, anyone unlucky enough to be outside. Micah doesn't care. He's having fun. Arthur is disgusted. You can hear it in his voice, see it in his body language. This is one of the first times you really understand what Micah is. Not just an outlaw, but someone who enjoys causing pain, who revels in chaos, who has no regard for human life. When they finally escape and ride back to camp, Arthur confronts Micah about the bloodbath. Micah just shrugs it off, says they're outlaws, that killing is what they do, that Arthur is being soft. And when they get back to camp, Micah goes straight to Dutch and thanks him for sending Arthur to rescue him. He tells Dutch how loyal Arthur was, how brave, how they make a great team. It's all lies, but Dutch eats it up. Micah is already learning how to play Dutch, how to use flattery and manipulation to get what he wants. Around camp, Micah's behaviour becomes increasingly problematic. He makes racist comments to Lenny Summers, calling him boy and making jokes about his intelligence. Lenny, who's well-read and articulate, sees right through Micah, but can't do anything about it because Dutch tolerates Micah's presence. Charles Smith, the gang's half-native American tracker, gets similar treatment. Micah uses slurs, makes jokes about scalping, treats Charles as less than human. Charles is quiet about it, but you can see the anger in his eyes. The women in camp fare no better. Micah makes inappropriate comments to Mary Beth, Karen and Tilly. He's crude and disrespectful, treating them as objects rather than people. When Sadie Adler joins the gang after her husband is murdered by the O'Driscolls, Micah mocks her grief. He tells her to stop crying, that her husband was weak for dying, that she should be grateful the gang took her in. Sadie, still raw from her loss, can barely contain her rage. But again, Dutch does nothing. He tells everyone to get along, to be civil, but he doesn't actually stop Micah's behaviour. Other gang members notice. Charles tells Arthur that Micah is trouble, that they should get rid of him before he causes real problems. Sadie says she doesn't trust him, that there's something wrong with him. Even Bill Williamson, who's not the brightest, seems uncomfortable around Micah sometimes. But Dutch has made his choice. Micah is part of the gang now, and questioning that means questioning Dutch's judgment. In Chapter 3, the gang moves to Rhodes, a town in the Scarlet Meadows region. They set up camp at Clemens Point, a beautiful spot on the shore of Flatiron Lake. The area is controlled by two feuding families, the Greys and the Braithwaites. These families have been at war for generations, each one trying to destroy the other. The Greys are former Confederate soldiers who control the law in Rhodes. Sheriff Lee Gray and his family have turned their Civil War connections into political power. The Braithwaites are plantation owners who made their fortune in moonshine after losing everything in the Civil War. Catherine Braithwaite and her sons run illegal distilleries and have their own private army. Dutch sees an opportunity. He thinks he can play them against each other, rob them both, and escape with enough money to finally leave the outlaw life behind. It's a classic Dutch plan. Complicated, risky, and ultimately doomed. The gang does jobs for Sheriff Lee Gray and his family, pretending to be their allies. At the same time, they do jobs for Catherine Braithwaite and her sons, pretending to be loyal to them. It's a dangerous game, and Hosea warns Dutch repeatedly that it's going to blow up in their faces. But Micah supports it enthusiastically. He tells Dutch it's brilliant, that it'll work perfectly, that anyone who doubts it is just scared. When Hosea expresses concerns, Micah dismisses them. When Arthur suggests caution, Micah calls him soft. The plan involves doing jobs for both families, gaining their trust, and then robbing them when they're vulnerable. For a while, it seems to work. The gang does jobs for the Greys, jobs for the Braithwaites, and collects money from both. The gang helps the Greys rob a Braithwaite moonshine operation. They burn down stills, steal product, and make it look like they're committed to the Grey family's cause. Then they turn around and help the Braithwaites steal horses from the Greys, raiding their stables in the dead of night. Each family thinks the gang is exclusively working for them. Dutch is convinced he's playing them perfectly, that he's smarter than both families combined. Micah constantly reinforces this belief, telling Dutch how clever he is, how the families are too stupid to see what's happening. The gang even gets involved in local politics. They help the Greys rig an election, intimidating voters and stuffing ballot boxes. It's dirty work, and Arthur can see how far they've fallen. They're not robbing from the rich anymore. They're helping corrupt politicians maintain power. But Dutch justifies it as necessary, as part of the larger plan. And Micah is right there, agreeing with everything Dutch says, but the situation spirals out of control. During this time, Sean Maguire, the young Irish gang member, is killed during a robbery in Rhodes. The gang walks into an ambush set by the Greys, who have figured out that the gang is playing both sides. Sean is shot in the head by a Grey family member, dying instantly. It's sudden and shocking. One moment Sean is joking and laughing, the next he's dead on the ground. The gang barely escapes, and they realise their deception has been discovered. Sean's death hits the gang hard. He was young, optimistic, full of life. He had a thick Irish accent and was always making jokes, always trying to lighten the mood. He called Arthur English, even though Arthur wasn't English, and he had a crush on Karen Jones that everyone in camp knew about. His death is meaningless, the result of Dutch's complicated scheme. Arthur is devastated. Hosea is angry. But Micah frames it differently. He tells Dutch that Sean died like a warrior, that this is what happens in war, that they need to hit back harder. Instead of seeing Sean's death as a warning to change course, Micah uses it to justify escalation. The Braithwaites kidnap Jack Marston, John's son, as revenge for the gang's deception. They take the 4-year-old boy and hide him, demanding that the gang stop working with the Greys. But Dutch is too proud to back down. Instead of negotiating, he decides to attack. The gang burns down the Braithwaite manor to rescue Jack, killing Catherine Braithwaite and most of her family. They've made powerful enemies, drawn attention from the law, and gained nothing. The money they collected is gone, spent on supplies and bribes. It's a disaster. The assault on Braithwaite Manor is one of the most intense missions in the game. The entire gang rides out together, armed to the teeth, ready for war. They storm the plantation, shooting their way through guards and servants. Catherine Braithwaite, the matriarch, stands on her porch and taunts them, telling them they'll never find Jack. Dutch shoots her sons right in front of her, then demands to know where Jack is. She tells them the boy has been sold to a man named Angelo Bronte in St. Denis. As the manor burns behind her, Catherine Braithwaite laughs at them, telling them they're all doomed. Dutch leaves her to burn with her house, but Micah frames it differently. He tells Dutch that the gang showed strength, that they proved they can't be pushed around, that this is what being an outlaw means. And Dutch, frustrated by the failure and looking for validation, starts listening more closely to Micah's words. Hosea Matthews sees what's happening. He's known Dutch for over 20 years, and he can see Micah's influence growing. He tries to talk to Dutch privately, tries to warn him that Micah is dangerous, that they need to cut him loose before it's too late. But Dutch won't hear it. He accuses Hosea of being jealous, of being too old and cautious, of not believing in him anymore. It's the beginning of the end of their friendship, and Micah is the wedge driving them apart. In Chapter 4, the gang moves to St. Denis, a bustling city modelled after New Orleans. They set up camp in Shady Belle, an abandoned plantation manor that's falling apart but provides shelter. St. Denis is unlike anywhere the gang has been before. It's a modern city with electric lights, streetcars and tall buildings. There are police everywhere, Pinkerton agents, and wealthy businessmen who represent everything Dutch claims to hate about civilization. The gang feels out of place here. They're used to small towns and wilderness camps. St. Denis is crowded, noisy, and full of people who look at them like they don't belong. Dutch sees this as an opportunity to strike at the heart of the system he despises. The Bank of St. Denis holds a fortune, and if they can pull it off, they'll have enough money to disappear forever. Before the bank robbery, the gang gets involved with Angelo Bronte, an Italian crime boss who controls much of St. Denis's underworld. Bronte has Jack Marston, having bought him from the Braithwaites. He returns Jack to the gang as a gesture of goodwill, but it's clear he's testing them. Bronte is sophisticated, educated, and dangerous in ways the gang isn't used to. He speaks multiple languages, has connections with politicians and police, and runs his criminal empire like a business. Bronte invites Dutch to a fancy party at the mayor's house. It's a garden party with the city's elite, and Dutch sees it as an opportunity to prove he belongs in their world. He dresses in his finest clothes, practices his manners, and attends the party with Arthur and a few others. But the wealthy elite see right through him. They mock his clothes, his accent, his philosophy. They treat him like a curiosity, a wild man from the frontier who's amusing but ultimately beneath them. One man asks Dutch to tell stories about the Wild West, like Dutch is some kind of performing animal. Another makes jokes about outlaws and savages, laughing at Dutch's expense. Dutch leaves the party furious and embarrassed. Arthur can see how much it hurt Dutch's pride, how the humiliation has wounded him deeply. Dutch has always seen himself as a philosopher, an intellectual, someone who's chosen the outlaw life because he's too smart and too principled to accept civilization's lies. But these people made him feel like a fool, like an uneducated criminal pretending to be something he's not. Micah uses this humiliation to fuel Dutch's anger. He tells Dutch that these people think they're better than him, that they need to be taught a lesson. When Dutch suggests robbing the trolley station as practice for the bank job, Micah enthusiastically supports it. The trolley station robbery is a disaster. It's heavily guarded and the gang barely escapes with any money. But instead of seeing this as a warning, Micah frames it as proof that they need to hit harder, steal more, show these city people what real outlaws can do. Dutch also decides to deal with Angelo Bronte. He's angry about the humiliation at the party, angry that Bronte set him up to be mocked, angry that this Italian immigrant has more power and respect than he does. So Dutch plans to kidnap Bronte and force him to help with the bank robbery. The gang crashes one of Bronte's parties, grabs him, and takes him away. Bronte is defiant, mocking Dutch even as he's being kidnapped. He tells Dutch that he's a fool, that the bank robbery will fail, that Dutch is leading his people to their deaths. Dutch's response is chilling. He takes Bronte to the swamp and drowns him, feeding his body to an alligator. It's brutal and unnecessary. Bronte was already beaten, already helpless. But Dutch kills him anyway, and there's something in Dutch's eyes that shows he's enjoying it. Arthur is disturbed. This isn't the Dutch he knows. This is someone darker, someone who kills not out of necessity, but out of rage and wounded pride. The bank robbery is supposed to be the big score, the one that sets them up for life. Dutch has been planning it for weeks, convinced this is their ticket to freedom. Hosea has doubts, Arthur has doubts, but Dutch is committed. And Micah is right there beside him, telling him it's going to work, that they'll be rich, that this is their destiny. The plan involves going in during business hours, taking hostages, and robbing the vault while keeping the law at bay. The day of the robbery, you can feel the tension. The gang members are nervous. Hosea looks worried. Arthur has a bad feeling. But they go through with it anyway because Dutch has decided. And questioning Dutch means questioning everything. They walk into the bank dressed in suits, trying to look like customers. Then they pull their guns and take control. For a few minutes it seems to work. They get into the vault, start loading money into bags. The hostages are scared but cooperative. The law hasn't arrived yet. But then everything goes wrong. The Pinkertons are waiting for them, having been tipped off by someone. Leviticus Cornwall, the oil magnate the gang has been robbing, shows up and gets killed by Dutch in a moment of rage. Cornwall confronts Dutch, calls him a killer and a thief, and Dutch just shoots him. No hesitation, no thought, just pulls the trigger and kills one of the most powerful men in America. In the chaos of the escape, Hosea Matthews is shot and killed by Agent Milton on the street outside the bank. The old man, Dutch's oldest friend and the gang's voice of reason, dies in the street like a common criminal. He's trying to surrender, trying to talk his way out, when Milton just shoots him in the chest. Hosea falls, and you can see the life leave his eyes. It's devastating. Hosea was the heart of the gang, the one who kept Dutch grounded, the one who reminded everyone what they were fighting for. Lenny Summers is killed by Pinkertons on a rooftop. The young man who had so much potential, who was smart and kind and full of promise, is cut down in his prime. Arthur watches him fall, unable to save him. John Marston is captured, dragged away by the law while the others can only watch. The rest barely escape, and only by fleeing on a boat that takes them to Guarma, an island off the coast of Cuba. Hosea's death is the turning point. With him gone, there's no one left to counter Micah's influence. Arthur tries, but Arthur is Dutch's son, his protégé. and there's a complicated dynamic there. When Arthur questions Dutch, it starts to sound like doubt to Dutch's ears, and Micah is always there to confirm that interpretation. He tells Dutch that Arthur doesn't believe in him anymore, that Arthur thinks he's losing it, that Arthur wants to take over. None of it is true, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to plant the seed of suspicion. Chapter 5 takes place on Guarma, and it's where Dutch truly begins to unravel. The island is a fictional Caribbean location, a sugar plantation colony ruled by a brutal dictator named Alberto Fussar. The gang washes up on the beach after their ship sinks in a storm. They're stranded thousands of miles from home, with no money, no supplies, and no way to get back. It's the lowest point in the gang's history. Only a few gang members made it to Guarma: Dutch, Arthur, Micah, Bill, and Javier. The others either stayed behind in America or were lost in the shipwreck. The 5 of them are alone, exhausted and desperate. They quickly get involved in a local revolution. A rebel leader named Hercule Fontaine is fighting against Fussar's regime, and he offers to help the gang escape if they help him overthrow the government. Dutch agrees immediately. It's classic Dutch, inserting himself into someone else's fight and pretending it's about principles when really it's about survival. But there's something different about Dutch on Guarma. He's more aggressive, more violent, more willing to kill without hesitation. The island brings out something dark in him, or maybe it just reveals what was always there. The gang helps the rebels attack Fussar's compound. They fight through soldiers, blow up a warship and storm the fortress. It's brutal, bloody work. The rebels are poorly armed and poorly trained, and many of them die. But Dutch doesn't seem to care. He's focused on escaping, on getting back to America, on continuing his plans. Micah is right there beside him, encouraging every violent decision, praising Dutch's leadership, telling him he's doing what needs to be done. On Guarma, Micah doesn't have to hide his true nature. There's no Hosea to call him out, no camp full of people watching. It's just the 5 of them, and Micah can be as cruel and violent as he wants. He kills without remorse, treats the locals with contempt, and constantly whispers in Dutch's ear about strength and survival. During the assault on the fortress, something happens that shows everyone who Dutch really is. An old woman confronts Dutch in the street. She's just a civilian, caught in the crossfire of the revolution. She accuses Dutch of being just another violent American, of bringing death and destruction wherever he goes. She's not wrong. The gang has killed dozens of soldiers, helped start a war and caused chaos across the island, and Dutch's response is to shoot her. Just shoots her, in cold blood, for speaking truth to power. Arthur is horrified. He's seen Dutch kill before, but always with some justification, some reason. This is different. This is murder, plain and simple. Bill and Javier are shocked too. But Micah doesn't even blink. He tells Dutch it was necessary, that she was going to cause problems, that Dutch did what had to be done, and Dutch, desperate for validation, accepts this interpretation. He tells himself that Micah is right, that the woman was a threat, that he had no choice. The Guarma experience changes everyone. They're fighting in a foreign war they don't understand, killing people who aren't their enemies, all to escape an island they never should have been on in the first place. The heat is oppressive, the jungle is hostile, disease and exhaustion wear them down. But more than the physical hardship, it's the psychological toll that matters. Guarma strips away the pretense of the gang's mission. There's no talk of freedom or living outside civilization's rules. There's just survival, raw and desperate. Micah thrives in this environment. Without the constraints of camp life, without Hosea's voice of reason, without the women and children who remind them they're supposed to be better than common thugs, Micah can be his true self. He kills without hesitation. He loots bodies. He treats the locals with contempt. And he constantly reinforces to Dutch that this is what strength looks like, that this is what it means to survive. Later, when they're alone, Arthur tries to talk to Dutch about the woman he killed. He asks Dutch why he did it, what threat she posed. Dutch gets defensive, angry. He says Arthur is questioning his judgment, that Arthur doesn't understand what it takes to survive. Micah overhears the conversation and jumps in, telling Dutch that Arthur's been doubting him for a while now, that Arthur thinks he's losing control. It's the first time Dutch openly sides with Micah over Arthur, and it's a moment Arthur will never forget. The gang eventually helps the rebels overthrow Fusar. They storm his fortress, kill him, and secure a boat for their escape. But the victory feels hollow. They've left behind a country in chaos, a revolution that will probably fail, and countless dead. As they sail away from Guarma, Arthur looks back at the island and realizes something has fundamentally changed. Dutch isn't the man he thought he was. Maybe he never was. When they return to America, everything has changed. The gang has scattered. Sadie Adler and Charles Smith have been holding things together at a new camp in Lacaille, a swamp in Lemoyne, but barely. The Pinkertons are closing in, money is running out, and Dutch is different, harder, more paranoid, more willing to listen to Micah and dismiss everyone else. Chapter 6 is where everything falls apart. The gang sets up camp in Beaver Hollow, a cave system in the mountains of Roanoke Ridge. It's the most miserable camp in the entire game. The location itself is cursed, a dark cave surrounded by dense forest where strange things happen. There's no music, no laughter, no sense of family, just fear and suspicion, and the slow realization that everything is falling apart. People are leaving. Pearson, the camp cook, talks about opening a store in Rhodes. Mary Beth wants to become a writer, having already started working on her first novel. Tilly's thinking about getting married to a lawyer she met. Even Reverend Swanson, who struggled with addiction throughout the game, gets clean and leaves to start a new life. The gang is dissolving, and everyone can feel it. The people who stay are either too loyal to leave, like Arthur and John, or too invested in Dutch's delusions, like Micah and Bill. Dutch's plans become increasingly desperate and irrational. He wants to rob a train one more time. He wants to help the Wapiti Native Americans fight the US Army, not because he cares about their cause, but because he sees them as a distraction he can use. He's grasping at straws, making decisions that put everyone in danger, and refusing to listen to anyone who questions him. This is when Micah's true nature becomes impossible to ignore. He's openly hostile to Arthur now, no longer bothering to hide his contempt. He questions Arthur's loyalty in front of Dutch, suggests that Arthur is planning to betray them, implies that Arthur's tuberculosis has made him weak and unreliable. The tuberculosis diagnosis comes in Chapter 6, when Arthur finally sees a doctor about his persistent cough. He's been coughing for weeks now, getting weaker, losing weight. He tells himself it's just a cold, just exhaustion, just the stress of everything that's happening. But deep down, he knows it's something worse. The doctor examines him and delivers the devastating news. Arthur has tuberculosis, and in 1899 it's essentially a death sentence. The doctor tells Arthur he has weeks, maybe months to live. There's no cure, no treatment that will save him. The best he can do is rest, eat well, and try to stay comfortable. But Arthur is an outlaw on the run. Rest isn't an option. Arthur sits in the doctor's office, stunned. Everything he's worked for, everything he's believed in, and now he's dying. The doctor's words echo in his head. Weeks, maybe months. He thinks about all the things he'll never do, all the people he'll never see again. He thinks about Dutch and the gang, and how he's wasted his life following a man who's lost his mind. He thinks about Mary Linton, the woman he loved and lost, and wonders if things could have been different. Arthur's reaction to the diagnosis is complex. At first, he's angry. Angry at the unfairness of it. Angry at the timing. Angry that he's going to die just when he's starting to see Dutch clearly. Then he's sad, thinking about all the things he'll never do, all the people he'll never see again. But eventually, Arthur finds a kind of peace in it. Knowing he's dying gives him clarity. It makes him realise what's really important. Not Dutch's approval, not the gang's success, but doing the right thing with the time he has left. The other gang members react differently to Arthur's illness. Charles and Sadie are sympathetic and supportive. They tell Arthur they're sorry, that they'll help him however they can. Charles offers to make medicine from herbs, traditional remedies his mother taught him. Sadie just sits with Arthur sometimes, not saying anything, just being there. Others, like Micah, see it as weakness to be exploited. Micah starts making comments about Arthur being sick, about how he's not reliable anymore, about how he's a liability to the gang. Dutch's reaction is perhaps the most painful. He doesn't offer comfort or support. Instead, he seems annoyed that Arthur is sick, as if Arthur chose to get tuberculosis just to inconvenience him. When Arthur tries to talk to Dutch about it, Dutch changes the subject, talks about plans and money and escape. He doesn't want to deal with Arthur's mortality because it forces him to confront his own failures. If Arthur is dying, if the gang is falling apart, then Dutch has to admit that his plans have failed. And Dutch's ego won't allow that. Micah uses Arthur's illness as a weapon. In camp conversations, he questions whether Arthur can still be trusted to do jobs. He suggests that Arthur's judgment is compromised, that the disease is affecting his mind. He tells Dutch that Arthur is trying to undermine him, that Arthur wants to take over the gang before he dies. Every cough, every moment of weakness, Micah uses it to drive a wedge between Arthur and Dutch. Dutch doesn't defend Arthur. The man who raised Arthur, who called him son, who trusted him for over 20 years, just sits there and lets Micah attack him. It's heartbreaking to watch. Arthur has given everything to Dutch. He's killed for him, robbed for him, believed in him, even when that belief required ignoring obvious problems. And now, when Arthur needs Dutch most, Dutch chooses Micah. The reason is simple. Micah tells Dutch what he wants to hear. Arthur tells Dutch what he needs to hear. Dutch wants to hear that he's a genius, that his plans are perfect, that anyone who doubts him is a traitor. Micah provides that. Arthur wants Dutch to see reality, to recognise that they're in a death spiral, to prioritise the gang's survival over his own ego. But that requires Dutch to admit he's been wrong, and Dutch's ego won't allow it. Micah understands Dutch's fundamental flaw. Dutch van der Linde is a narcissist. He has an inflated sense of his own importance, a deep need for admiration, and an inability to handle criticism. His entire identity is built on being the leader, the visionary, the man with the plan. When that identity is threatened, Dutch doesn't respond with reason. He responds with anger and defensiveness. Micah recognizes this and exploits it ruthlessly. Every time Arthur suggests a different approach, Micah frames it as disloyalty. Every time someone expresses doubt, Micah calls them a traitor. Every time Dutch makes a mistake, Micah blames someone else. It's a classic manipulation tactic. Isolate the target from anyone who might provide a reality check. Surround them with yes men and make them dependent on you for validation. Specific examples of Micah's manipulation are everywhere once you know to look for them. When Arthur suggests they should lay low after a job goes wrong, Micah tells Dutch that Arthur is getting soft, that he's lost his nerve. When John questions Dutch's decisions, Micah reminds Dutch that John abandoned the gang for a year, that his loyalty can't be trusted. When Sadie wants to help with jobs, Micah tells Dutch that women shouldn't be involved in men's work, that it's a sign of how desperate they've become. Micah is particularly skilled at reframing events to support his narrative. When a robbery goes wrong, it's not because the plan was flawed, it's because someone didn't follow orders properly. When gang members get killed, it's not because they were put in unnecessary danger, it's because they weren't strong enough to survive. When the law closes in, it's not because they've been too reckless, it's because someone betrayed them. The dynamic between Micah and Bill Williamson shows this manipulation clearly. Bill is not a smart man. He's loyal and strong, but easily manipulated and desperate for approval. Micah recognizes this and uses Bill as a tool. He flatters Bill, makes him feel important, and turns him against Arthur and John. Micah tells Bill that Arthur thinks he's stupid, that John looks down on him, that only Micah and Dutch truly appreciate his worth. By the end of the game, Bill is firmly in Micah's camp, following his lead even when it means betraying people he's known for years. Bill doesn't even realize he's being used. He thinks Micah is his friend. Javier Esquella's relationship with Micah is more complicated. Javier is loyal to Dutch above all else, and when Dutch sides with Micah, Javier follows. But you can see Javier's discomfort. He doesn't like Micah. He doesn't trust him. During the final confrontation, when people have to choose sides, Javier points his gun up in the air rather than at Arthur or John. He's following Dutch, but he's not fully committed. It's a small detail that shows even people who side with Micah often do so reluctantly. But here's the truth about Micah that makes him truly despicable. He doesn't even believe in Dutch. He's not a true believer who's been corrupted by Dutch's philosophy. He's a con man who recognized a mark. Micah doesn't care about Dutch's vision of freedom and living outside civilization's rules. He cares about himself. He saw an opportunity to use Dutch's gang for his own benefit, to hide behind Dutch's leadership while pursuing his own agenda, and to eventually betray everyone for money. The revelation comes in Chapter 6 during a mission where Arthur and Sadie rescue Abigail from the Pinkertons. Agent Milton, the lead Pinkerton hunting the gang, tells Arthur that Micah has been their informant since they returned from Guarma. Micah has been feeding the Pinkertons information about the gang's location, their plans, everything. In exchange, the Pinkertons have been letting Micah operate freely, promising him money and freedom once the gang's destroyed. It's the ultimate betrayal. And it's made worse by what happened earlier. Molly O'Shea, Dutch's girlfriend, had a breakdown and drunkenly confessed to being a rat. Susan Grimshaw shot her dead for it. The gang killed one of their own based on a false confession. Molly never talked to the Pinkertons. She was just desperate for Dutch's attention. so desperate that she claimed responsibility for the gang's troubles, even though she had nothing to do with them. And the whole time, the real traitor was standing right there, pretending to be the most loyal member. When Arthur learns about Micah's betrayal, everything clicks into place. All of Micah's behaviour, all of his manipulation, all of his attempts to turn Dutch against the others, it all makes sense now. Micah wasn't trying to take over the gang or become Dutch's right-hand man for power. He was trying to destroy the gang from within while positioning himself as the last man standing. Every terrible decision Dutch made, Micah encouraged it, because he knew it would lead to disaster. Every person who left or died, Micah celebrated it because it meant fewer people to deal with. Arthur confronts Dutch with this information. He tells Dutch that Micah is a rat, that Agent Milton confirmed it before Abigail killed him. It's not speculation or paranoia, it's fact. And Dutch's response is to doubt Arthur, to suggest that maybe Arthur is lying, that maybe Arthur is the one who can't be trusted. After everything they've been through, after 20 years of loyalty, Dutch chooses to believe Micah over Arthur. The gang gets involved with the Wapiti Native Americans during this time, led by a young warrior named Eagle Flies and his father, Chief Rains Fall. The Wapiti are being pushed off their land by the US Army and oil companies. They're desperate, angry, and looking for allies. Dutch sees them as useful tools, people he can manipulate into fighting his battles for him. He doesn't care about their cause or their suffering. He just sees them as a distraction he can use against the US Army. Eagle Flies is young and angry, much like Dutch was once, and Dutch uses that anger to manipulate him into increasingly violent actions. Dutch tells Eagle Flies that the only way to fight oppression is through violence, that peaceful resistance is weakness, that his father's wisdom is cowardice. Eagle Flies listens because Dutch is telling him what he wants to hear, validating his anger and his desire for revenge. Arthur sees what Dutch is doing and tries to stop it. He talks to Rainsfall, the wise old chief who understands that fighting the US Army is suicide. Rainsfall knows his people can't win a war against the government, but he can't control his son's anger. Arthur tries to be a voice of reason, warning Eagle Flies that Dutch is using him, that this path leads only to death. But Eagle Flies won't listen. He's too angry, too desperate to strike back at the people who've taken everything from him. Eventually, Eagle Flies dies in a raid on an oil refinery, killed by the very system his father warned him about. Arthur is there when it happens, watching another young man die because of Dutch's manipulation. Eagle Flies dies in Arthur's arms, and with his last breath he realizes his father was right. His death accomplishes nothing except proving Rain's fall right. The Wapiti are no better off. The oil companies continue their work. The US Army continues pushing them off their land. Eagle Flies died for nothing, just another victim of Dutch's ego. Dutch also insists on robbing one more train, despite the fact that the gang is falling apart and the law is closing in. It's a desperate, pointless gesture, but Dutch needs to prove that he's still in control, that he can still pull off the big scores. The train belongs to Leviticus Cornwall's company, even though Cornwall is dead. Dutch wants to rob it as a final insult to the man he killed. The train robbery is a disaster. They stop the train in a remote area, blow open the safe, and find almost nothing inside. The money they get barely covers the cost of the dynamite they used. Several gang members are nearly killed when the law shows up faster than expected. They have to fight their way out, leaving bodies behind, drawing even more attention from the Pinkertons. But Micah frames it as a success, telling Dutch that they showed courage, that they proved they're still dangerous. There's a mission in Chapter 6 where Micah convinces Dutch to rob a stagecoach, and he insists that Arthur come along. The whole thing feels wrong from the start. Micah is too eager, too insistent. During the robbery, things go wrong. The law shows up in force, and the gang barely escapes. Arthur realizes afterward that Micah was trying to get him killed. He was hoping the law would do what Micah couldn't do directly. It's one of many examples of Micah's cowardice. He talks big about strength and survival of the fittest, but he won't face Arthur in a fair fight. The final confrontation happens during the Pinkerton assault on Beaver Hollow. The gang is falling apart. People are leaving, taking what they can and running. Susan Grimshaw, one of the original members, tries to defend Arthur. She accuses Micah of being the traitor. Micah's response is to shoot her. Just shoots her dead, right there in camp in front of everyone. And Dutch does nothing. He doesn't defend Susan. He doesn't arrest Micah. He doesn't even react. He just stands there. And in that moment, everyone realizes that Dutch is gone. Arthur and John make a run for it, trying to escape with what's left of the gang's money. Micah and Dutch chase them, along with a few remaining gang members who are still loyal to Dutch. It all comes to a head on a mountain, with the Pinkertons closing in and nowhere left to run. Arthur, knowing he's dying from tuberculosis, tells John to run, to get to his family, to live the life Arthur never could. And Arthur stays behind to hold off Micah and Dutch, to buy John time to escape. The confrontation between Arthur and Micah is brutal. Arthur is dying, coughing up blood, barely able to breathe, but he fights anyway. In the high honor version, Arthur beats Micah despite being half dead. He's on top of Micah, ready to finish him, when Dutch arrives. Dutch points his gun at both of them, unable or unwilling to choose a side. Arthur makes one final plea. He tells Dutch that Micah is a rat, that everything Micah has said has been a lie, that Dutch needs to see the truth, and for a moment, just a moment, you can see doubt in Dutch's eyes. But then Micah starts talking. He tells Dutch that Arthur is lying, that Arthur has always been jealous, that Arthur wants to destroy everything Dutch has built, and Dutch lowers his gun and walks away, leaving Arthur to die. In the high honor ending, Micah leaves Arthur to die from his illness. Arthur crawls to a rock overlooking the valley and watches the sun rise one last time. He's at peace. He knows John made it. He knows his death meant something. The sun rises over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, and Arthur Morgan dies watching the beauty of the world he's leaving behind. In the low honor ending, Micah shoots Arthur in the face, killing him execution style. Either way, Micah survives. The traitor wins. Arthur's final ride before the confrontation is one of the most iconic moments in gaming. As Arthur rides to face his death, the song That's the Way It Is plays. The lyrics talk about standing unshaken amid the crash of worlds, about facing the end with dignity. Arthur rides through the places he's been, past the camps where the gang once laughed and sang, through the towns where they pulled jobs, across the landscapes that have become so familiar. It's a farewell to the world, a final moment of reflection before the end. Players who've spent hundreds of hours with Arthur feel the weight of this moment. This is goodbye. The game's epilogue, set 8 years later in 1907, follows John Marston as he tries to build a new life. He's got a ranch called Beecher's Hope in West Elizabeth, a family, and a chance at the honest life Arthur died to give him. He's working with Charles, Smith and Uncle to build a house from the ground up. They clear land, haul lumber, construct walls and a roof. It's honest work, the kind of work John never thought he'd do. The house building sequence is surprisingly emotional. You're doing manual labour, simple tasks like hammering nails and carrying wood, but it represents everything Arthur wanted for John. A home, a family, a future. Charles helps because he loved Arthur and wants to honour his memory. Uncle helps because despite his laziness, he cares about John and Abigail. Together they build something real, something permanent, something that represents hope. John is also working as a ranch hand for other people, learning the trade, trying to be a normal person. He works for a man named Geddes, herding cattle and mending fences. It's hard work, but it's honest. John is learning what it means to earn money through labour rather than theft. He's learning what it means to be part of a community, to have neighbours who trust him, to build relationships based on something other than crime. He proposes to Abigail by the lake, a simple moment that means everything. John is nervous, fumbling with his words, trying to express feelings he's never been good at expressing. He tells Abigail that he wants to marry her, that he wants to be a proper husband and father, that he wants to give her and Jack the life they deserve. Abigail says yes, and for the first time in years, John feels like maybe he can have a future. They get married in a simple ceremony with Charles, Uncle and Sadie in attendance. Jack is growing up, learning to read and write, becoming the kind of person Arthur would have been proud of. For a while, it seems like maybe the cycle can be broken, like maybe John really can leave the outlaw life behind. The epilogue lets you experience this peace, this normalcy, and it makes what comes next even more tragic. You can work the ranch, tend to animals, spend time with your family. It's quiet and peaceful, and after everything that happened in the main story, it feels earned. But then, Sadie Adler shows up with information about Micah's location. Micah has his own gang now, operating out of a camp in the mountains near Strawberry. He's been robbing and killing, living like a king with the money he stole from the Van der Linde gang. Sadie has been tracking him for years, driven by her own need for revenge. She tells John where Micah is, and she can see the conflict in John's eyes. He knows he should walk away. He has everything Arthur wanted him to have. He's free, safe, with his family. Abigail begs him not to go, tells him that Arthur died so John could have this life, that throwing it away for revenge would make Arthur's sacrifice meaningless. She's crying, pleading with him to stay, to let Micah go, to choose his family over his past. But John can't let it go. He tells himself it's about justice, about making sure Micah pays for what he did. But really, it's about the fact that John can't fully leave the outlaw life behind. Part of him misses it. Part of him feels guilty for having peace when Arthur is dead. Part of him needs to prove that he's still the man he used to be. So he agrees to go with Sadie and Charles to hunt down Micah, even though he knows it's a mistake. John, Sadie and Charles track Micah to his camp at Mount Hagen, high in the mountains where snow covers everything. The journey there is treacherous. They ride through blizzards, up narrow mountain paths, knowing that they're riding toward violence and death. Charles tries one last time to talk John out of it, telling him that Arthur wouldn't want this. But John's mind is made up. The assault on Micah's camp is brutal. You fight through Micah's gang, killing everyone in your path. These aren't the Van der Linde gang. They're just thugs, hired guns with no loyalty to each other. When the shooting starts, they scatter and die. There's no coordination, no willingness to sacrifice for each other. Micah has built nothing of value, just a collection of violent men held together by money. It's everything the Van der Linde gang wasn't, and it shows what Micah's philosophy really creates. Nothing but death and emptiness. You finally reach Micah. He's standing in the snow outside a cabin, arrogant as ever. Even now, even surrounded by dead men, even facing John Marston with murder in his eyes, Micah is smiling. He taunts John, tells him that Arthur died like a dog, coughing and weak. He says the gang was always weak, that they were all fools following Dutch's stupid dreams. He calls Arthur a traitor, says he deserved what he got. He's trying to get under John's skin, trying to make him angry and sloppy. Every word is designed to hurt, to provoke, to make John make a mistake. But before the fight can truly begin, before John can pull his gun, Dutch Van der Linde appears. He walks out of the cabin, older and more weathered than the last time John saw him. For a moment nobody moves, nobody speaks. The three of them stand in the snow, the wind howling around them, and the weight of history hangs heavy in the air. Dutch has been on the run for 8 years, leading a new gang of Native Americans in increasingly desperate robberies. He's a shadow of what he once was. His hair is longer, greyer, his eyes are haunted. He looks like a man who hasn't slept well in years, who's been running from ghosts he can't escape. The standoff between John, Micah and Dutch is electric. Dutch has his guns drawn and for a moment it's unclear what he's going to do. Is he there to help Micah, to kill John, to finish what they started 8 years ago? Micah starts talking immediately, telling Dutch that John came to kill them both, that John is the traitor, that they need to work together. But something in Dutch's eyes has changed. He's looking at Micah differently now. Maybe it's seeing John again, the son he abandoned. Maybe it's 8 years of living with what he's done. Maybe it's just that he's finally seeing Micah for what he really is. Then Dutch shoots Micah, just shoots him, right in the chest, killing him instantly. The gunshot echoes across the mountain. Micah looks down at the wound, surprise on his face for the first time. He tries to say something, but blood fills his mouth. He falls to his knees, then face first into the snow. The man who destroyed the Van der Linde gang, who betrayed everyone, who caused so much death and suffering, dies in the snow on a mountain, killed by the man he manipulated for so long. Dutch finally sees the truth, finally understands that Micah was the rat, that Micah destroyed everything, that Micah played him for a fool. It's 8 years too late. Arthur is dead. Hosea is dead. Lenny, Sean, Molly, Susan, all dead. The gang is destroyed. Countless people have died. But Dutch finally sees Micah for what he is. Dutch doesn't say anything to John. He just looks at Micah's body lying in the snow, then at John, and there's something in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Acknowledgement. An understanding that he destroyed everything good in his life. Then he turns and walks away into the snow, disappearing into the blizzard. He leaves the money behind, the money that so many people died for, the Blackwater money that started all of this. It's not redemption for Dutch. He'll go on to do terrible things in the years between this moment and Red Dead Redemption 1, but it's acknowledgement, an admission that he was wrong, that Arthur was right, that Micah was poison. Micah's death is satisfying in the moment. You've spent the entire game hating this man, watching him destroy everything you care about. Finally, you get to see him pay for it. You can search his body, take his guns, take the money he stole. You can stand over him and feel that justice has been served, but the satisfaction is hollow. Micah's death doesn't bring Arthur back. It doesn't bring Hosea or Lenny or any of the others back. It doesn't undo the damage he caused. It doesn't heal the wounds he inflicted. And worse, by killing Micah, John has put himself back on the Pinkertons' radar. They'll find Micah's body frozen in the snow. They'll investigate. They'll find witnesses who saw John Marston in the area. They'll trace it back to Beecher's Hope. And in a few years they'll come for him. Agent Ross, who was Milton's partner, will show up at John's ranch and force him to hunt down his old gang members. And when that's done, when John has done everything they asked, they'll kill him anyway. John's revenge costs him everything, just like Arthur warned it would. Arthur's final words to John were about revenge being a fool's game, about letting go and moving forward. But John couldn't do it, and it destroys him. In Red Dead Redemption 1 we see the consequences. John is forced to hunt down Bill Williamson, Javier Escuela, and eventually Dutch himself. He does it to protect his family, but in the end the government betrays him. They gun him down outside his barn while his family watches. Jack grows up without a father and becomes an outlaw himself, killing Agent Ross in revenge. The cycle continues, generation after generation, because no one can let go. Micah Bell is effective as a villain because he's realistic. He's not supernatural or superhuman. He's just a man who understands human weakness and has no conscience. He knows how to find the cracks in people's armour and exploit them. With Dutch, it's ego. With Bill Williamson, it's the need for approval. With Javier Escuela, it's loyalty to Dutch above all else. Micah identifies what each person wants or fears and uses it against them. The game never tries to make you sympathise with Micah. There's no tragic backstory that excuses his behaviour, no moment of vulnerability that makes you understand him. He's presented as purely antagonistic from start to finish. Some people are just broken in a way that makes them dangerous to everyone around them. Micah is that kind of broken. His father's abuse explains how he got that way, but it doesn't excuse what he becomes. Micah represents a dark mirror of Arthur. Both men are enforcers, skilled with guns and violence. Both are products of their upbringing. But where Arthur was taught loyalty and honour, Micah was taught that loyalty is weakness. Where Arthur questions and doubts and tries to be better, Micah embraces his worst impulses. Where Arthur sacrifices himself for others, Micah sacrifices others for himself. They're two sides of the same coin, showing how similar starting points can lead to radically different destinations. The game uses Micah to explore the danger of blind loyalty. Dutch's gang operates on loyalty. It's the foundation of everything they do. But Micah weaponizes that loyalty. He uses the language of loyalty to isolate Dutch from anyone who might help him. He tells Dutch that he's the only one who truly believes, that everyone else is doubting, that only Micah can be trusted. It's a classic cult tactic, and it works because Dutch wants to believe it. Micah also represents what happens when the Old West mythology is stripped of its romance. Dutch talks about freedom and living by your own rules, about rejecting civilization's hypocrisy. But Micah shows what that philosophy looks like without any moral framework. It's just violence and selfishness. It's taking what you want and killing anyone who gets in your way. It's the dark truth beneath the romantic myth of the outlaw. The game uses Micah to show how toxic masculinity destroys communities. Micah's version of masculinity is all about dominance, violence, and the rejection of anything he perceives as weakness. Compassion is weakness. Loyalty is weakness. Love is weakness. The only thing that matters is power and survival. This philosophy poisons the gang, turning brothers against each other, creating an environment where trust is impossible and everyone is a potential threat. The contrast between Arthur's redemption arc and Micah's static evil is crucial to the game's themes. Arthur changes throughout the story. He starts as Dutch's enforcer, willing to do whatever Dutch asks. But as he sees Dutch's true nature, as he contracts tuberculosis and faces his own mortality, Arthur becomes a better person. He helps people without expecting anything in return. He tries to save the gang members who want to leave. He sacrifices himself so John can have a future. Arthur's arc is about growth and redemption. Micah never changes. He's the same person at the end that he was at the beginning. He doesn't grow or learn or develop. He's static, unchanging, a constant force of destruction. This makes him terrifying in a different way than a villain who becomes more powerful. Micah is terrifying because he's predictable. You know he's going to betray everyone. You know he's going to cause destruction. You know he's going to survive while better people die. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. The voice acting for Micah, provided by Peter Blomquist, is phenomenal. Blomquist gives Micah a distinctive voice that's both charming and unsettling. He can sound friendly and reasonable one moment, then switch to threatening and cruel the next. The performance captures Micah's ability to manipulate people, to seem like he's on your side even as he's plotting against you. There's a sliminess to Micah's voice, a false friendliness that makes your skin crawl. The physical design of Micah is also perfect. He's got blonde hair, a moustache and fancy clothes. He dresses better than most of the gang, always trying to look important and successful. His guns have ivory handles, expensive and showy, but there's something off about him. His eyes are cold. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. He looks like a snake in human form, and the game's artists captured that perfectly. One of the most chilling aspects of Micah's character is how he never shows remorse. When he kills Susan Grimshaw, he doesn't hesitate or feel bad. When he betrays the gang to the Pinkertons, he doesn't lose sleep. When Arthur confronts him about being a rat, he doesn't deny it or try to justify it. He just smirks and keeps going. Micah is a sociopath in the truest sense. He doesn't feel guilt or empathy. He doesn't form real emotional connections. He just uses people and discards them. Micah's treatment of women throughout the game is consistently reprehensible. In one camp interaction, you can see him bothering Mary Beth while she's trying to read. He makes crude comments, invades her personal space, and won't leave her alone even when she clearly wants him to go. Arthur can intervene, telling Micah to back off, but Micah just laughs it off. He does the same thing to Karen and Tilly, treating them as objects for his amusement rather than as people. When Sadie Adler first joins the gang, she's grieving her husband's death. She's traumatized, barely functional. Micah mocks her for it. He tells her to stop crying, that her husband was weak, that she should be grateful the gang took her in. Later, when Sadie starts learning to fight and becomes more active in the gang's operations, Micah mocks her for that too. He calls her mannish, suggests she's trying to be something she's not, questions her femininity. No matter what Sadie does, Micah finds a way to belittle her. The racism Micah displays is equally ugly. He constantly makes comments to Lenny about his intelligence, suggesting that Lenny can't read or think properly. This is particularly cruel because Lenny is one of the most educated members of the gang. He reads philosophy, writes in a journal, and is articulate and thoughtful. Micah's racism isn't based on anything real. It's just hatred for the sake of hatred. Charles Smith gets similar treatment. Micah makes jokes about scalping, calls Charles savage, and treats him as less than human. Charles is quiet about it, but in one mission, he tells Arthur that Micah is going to get himself killed if he keeps running his mouth. Charles is a patient man, but even his patience has limits. The game shows how the other gang members react to Micah's racism. They shut him down, defend Lenny and Charles, and make it clear that Micah's views aren't shared by the group. There's a scene where Micah and Lenny are both in camp, and Micah makes one of his racist comments. Lenny responds with a cutting remark about Micah's intelligence, pointing out that Micah can barely read. It's a small moment, but it shows that Lenny isn't intimidated by Micah. He sees Micah for what he is, an ignorant bully who uses racism to make himself feel superior. The contrast between how Arthur treats people and how Micah treats people is stark. Arthur, even at his worst, has lines he won't cross. He doesn't hurt women or children. He doesn't betray his friends. He doesn't kill for pleasure. Micah has no lines. He'll do anything to anyone if it benefits him. The game uses this contrast to show two different paths. Arthur's path leads to redemption and peace, even in death. Micah's path leads to a lonely death in the snow, hated by everyone who knew him. Micah's relationship with his guns is telling. He has 2 custom revolvers with ivory handles, and he's constantly cleaning them, admiring them, talking about them. They're extensions of his identity, symbols of his power. The game uses this to show how Micah defines himself through violence. He's not a person with interests and relationships and depth. He's a killer with fancy guns. When you finally kill him in the epilogue, you can take his revolvers as trophies. Some players do, wanting to own the weapons of the man they hated. Others refuse, not wanting anything that belonged to Micah. The game's epilogue shows the long-term consequences of Micah's actions. 8 years later, the survivors are scattered. Charles has found peace, helping the Wapiti tribe and eventually settling down. Sadie is still hunting bounties, but seems directionless, unable to find purpose after her revenge is complete. John is trying to build a normal life, but can't escape his past. When John kills Micah, he thinks he's closing a chapter, getting justice for Arthur. But he's actually opening a new chapter of violence. The Pinkertons will find Micah's body, trace it to John, and come for him. John's revenge against Micah leads directly to his death in Red Dead Redemption 1. This is where the tragedy of Micah Bell truly lies. Not in his death, which he deserves, but in the destruction he causes. He destroys the Vanderlyn Gang, one of the most successful outlaw gangs in the West. He destroys Dutch Van, Delinda, turning a charismatic leader into a paranoid madman. He destroys the relationships between gang members, turning brothers against each other. He destroys Arthur's faith in Dutch, and indirectly he destroys John Marston, because John's need for revenge puts him back on the Pinkertons' radar. The relationship between Micah and Dutch is the core of the game's tragedy. Dutch is a flawed man with a genuine vision, corrupted by his own ego and Micah's manipulation. Micah is a purely selfish man with no vision beyond his own enrichment, using Dutch's ego to achieve his goals. Together, they're catastrophic. Dutch provides the authority and charisma, Micah provides the manipulation, and the combination is lethal. The game shows how one toxic person can destroy an entire community if they're allowed to operate unchecked. Micah isn't the strongest member of the gang. He's not the smartest. He's not the most skilled. But he's the most willing to lie, manipulate, and betray. And in a community built on trust and loyalty, that makes him incredibly dangerous. The gang's strength was their unity, their willingness to die for each other. Micah systematically destroys that unity, creating suspicion and paranoia until the gang tears itself apart from within. Arthur's hatred of Micah is one of the most consistent elements of his character throughout the game. From their first meeting to Arthur's death, Arthur never trusts Micah, never likes him, and never stops warning Dutch about him. Arthur's instincts are right from the beginning, but no one listens. It's frustrating because you can see the disaster coming, but you're powerless to stop it. Arthur tries. He warns Dutch repeatedly. He tells the other gang members to watch out for Micah. He refuses to work with Micah whenever possible, but it's not enough. The missions where you're forced to work with Micah are some of the most uncomfortable in the game. The dialogue is hostile. Arthur barely tolerates Micah's presence. Micah makes snide comments and tries to get under Arthur's skin. It's clear that they hate each other, and it's only Dutch's authority that keeps them from killing each other. These missions show how toxic the gang has become, how the family atmosphere has been replaced by suspicion and hostility. There's a moment in Chapter 6 where Arthur is talking to Sadie, and he says something like, "We're more ghosts than people." It's a recognition that the gang is already dead, that they're just going through the motions until the inevitable end. Micah is the one who killed them, not with guns or violence, but with words and manipulation. He convinced Dutch to make terrible decisions. He turned the gang against each other. He betrayed them to the Pinkertons. The game's treatment of Micah serves as a commentary on loyalty and trust. The gang's downfall comes from misplaced loyalty. They're loyal to Dutch, who's loyal to Micah, who's loyal to no one. It's a chain of loyalty that leads to destruction because the person at the end is rotten. The game shows how loyalty without discernment is dangerous, how trusting the wrong person can destroy everything. Arthur understands this by the end. He questions Dutch not because he's disloyal, but because he's loyal to what the gang was supposed to be, not what it's become. He's loyal to the idea of family and honour, not to Dutch's ego. But by the time Arthur figures this out, it's too late. The damage is done. Arthur can only try to save what's left, which is John and his family. Micah Bell succeeds as a villain because he's so thoroughly, completely hateable. Every player who finishes Red Dead Redemption 2 hates Micah. He's designed to be hated, from his racist comments to his betrayal, to his treatment of Arthur. But he's not a cartoon villain. He's a realistic portrayal of a certain type of person. The manipulator who uses others' trust against them. The sociopath who feels no remorse. The opportunist who sees every relationship as transactional. The game makes you work with Micah on several missions, forcing you to cooperate with someone you hate. It's uncomfortable and frustrating, which is exactly the point. The game wants you to feel what Arthur feels, the disgust and anger at having to tolerate Micah's presence. By making you work with Micah, the game creates a personal investment in seeing him fail. When Micah finally dies, it's not just Arthur getting revenge. It's you, the player, getting revenge for hours of having to tolerate this character. Micah's impact on the narrative can't be overstated. He's the catalyst for everything bad that happens. Without Micah, Dutch might have listened to Hosea. The gang might have escaped. Arthur might have lived longer. Jon might have stayed away. Micah is the domino that starts the chain reaction, the infection that spreads through the gang. The game also uses Micah to show how evil often hides behind a mask of normalcy. Micah doesn't look like a monster. He looks like just another outlaw. He doesn't act like a villain in every scene. Sometimes he's charming, funny, even helpful. But it's all performance. The game shows how real evil often doesn't announce itself. It blends in, acts normal, and waits for the right moment to strike. The final confrontation between Arthur and Micah on the mountain is the culmination of everything the game's been building toward. Two men who have hated each other from the beginning, finally facing off with no one to stop them. Arthur is dying, barely able to stand. Micah is healthy and strong, but Arthur fights anyway because it's not about winning. It's about buying time for Jon to escape, about standing up to evil one last time, about dying on his feet rather than on his knees. In the high honor version, Arthur wins the fight. He beats Micah despite being half dead from tuberculosis. It's a testament to Arthur's strength of will, his determination, his refusal to let Micah win. But then Dutch arrives and chooses to walk away, leaving Arthur to die. It's the ultimate betrayal. And Micah survives because Dutch won't make a choice. Micah's survival past Arthur's death is important thematically. It shows that justice isn't automatic, that bad people often get away with their crimes, that the universe doesn't always punish evil. Arthur dies believing that Micah will continue to destroy lives, that Dutch will never see the truth. It's only 8 years later, when Jon tracks Micah down, that justice is finally served. But even then it's not really justice, it's revenge. And revenge, as Arthur tried to teach Jon, is a fool's game. Jon's revenge costs him everything. The Pinkertons find Micah's body, trace it to Jon, and eventually come for him. Jon dies defending his ranch, gunned down by the army. His son Jack grows up without a father and becomes an outlaw himself. The cycle continues. The game's message is clear. Evil exists. It's often successful, and fighting it has a cost. But the game also shows that fighting evil is still worthwhile, even when you lose. Arthur doesn't defeat Micah, but he saves Jon. He doesn't change Dutch's mind, but he dies with his honour intact. He doesn't win, but he doesn't surrender either. The game argues that how you face evil is more important than whether you defeat it. Micah Bell is a masterclass in villain design. He's hateable without being cartoonish. He's effective without being overpowered. He's realistic without being boring. He serves the story's themes perfectly, while also being a compelling character in his own right. He's the kind of villain that makes you genuinely angry, that makes you invested in seeing him fail, that makes his eventual death one of the most satisfying moments in gaming. When you finally kill Micah in the epilogue, standing over his body in the snow, there's a moment of satisfaction. Justice has been served. The villain is dead, but that satisfaction is fleeting. Micah's death doesn't change anything. It doesn't bring Arthur back. It doesn't save the gang. It doesn't break the cycle of violence. It's just one more death in a story full of death. As you walk away from Micah's body, leaving him to freeze in the snow, you realize that killing him was necessary but ultimately hollow. Arthur died without seeing justice. Hosea died not knowing Micah was the rat. Lenny, Sean, Molly, Susan, all of them died while Micah lived. By the time Micah pays for his crimes, the damage is irreversible. Micah Bell represents a truth we don't want to acknowledge. Sometimes evil wins. Sometimes the bad guy gets away with it. Sometimes justice is delayed or denied entirely. Micah embodies this uncomfortable reality. He destroys the gang, betrays everyone, and survives. He gets 8 years of freedom before justice catches up with him, and even his death doesn't undo the damage he caused. But the game also shows that even when evil wins, it doesn't really win. Micah gets money and power, but he dies alone, hated by everyone who knew him. He has no friends, no family, no one who mourns his passing. His death is meaningless, just another outlaw killed in the snow. Compare that to Arthur, who dies surrounded by love and respect, who's remembered as a hero by those who knew him, whose sacrifice saves John's family. Micah Bell is the villain Red Dead Redemption 2 needed. He's the perfect antagonist for Arthur's protagonist, the dark mirror that shows what Arthur could have become. He's the catalyst for Dutch's descent into madness, the infection that destroys the gang from within. He's the embodiment of everything wrong with the outlaw life, the violence and selfishness and betrayal, stripped of any romantic notions. In the end, Micah Bell is exactly what he appears to be, a snake. He slithers into the gang, destroys everything he touches, and strikes when you're not looking. He's patient, calculating, and completely without conscience. He uses people's trust against them, their loyalty as a weapon, their love as a vulnerability. He's the worst kind of villain because he's realistic. We've all met people like Micah, people who manipulate and lie and use others for their own benefit. That's what makes him so effective as a villain. He's not a fantasy. He's a warning about manipulation, about toxic people, about the cost of misplaced trust. The Van der Linde gang's mistake was trusting Micah, or more accurately, allowing Dutch to trust Micah without question. They saw the warning signs but didn't act on them because questioning Dutch meant questioning the gang's entire structure. Micah Bell's story teaches a lesson about trust and discernment. Not everyone who claims to be loyal is actually loyal. Not everyone who speaks the language of family actually cares about family. Some people are just using those words to manipulate you, to get what they want, to exploit your trust. Arthur's instincts about Micah were right from the beginning. He should have trusted them. The gang should have listened to him. The tragedy of Micah Bell isn't his own. He lived exactly the life he wanted, did exactly what he wanted, and only paid for it at the very end. His tragedy is what he did to others, the lives he destroyed, the trust he betrayed, the family he tore apart. The Van der Linde gang was doomed from the moment they let Micah in. He accelerated their decline, turned a slow death into a catastrophic collapse, transformed a family into a collection of paranoid, suspicious individuals who couldn't trust each other. When you think about Red Dead Redemption 2's story, you think about Arthur's redemption, Dutch's fall, and Micah's betrayal. These three elements are intertwined, each one affecting the others, creating a tragedy that feels inevitable in hindsight, but devastating in the moment. Micah is the catalyst, the infection. Without him, the story would be different. Maybe the gang was always doomed, but Micah's presence changes everything. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a masterpiece of storytelling, and Micah Bell is a crucial part of why. He's the villain the story needs, the antagonist who makes the tragedy work, the character you love to hate. He's perfectly written, brilliantly performed, and utterly despicable. And when he finally dies in the snow, shot by the man he manipulated for so long, it's one of gaming's most satisfying moments. But the satisfaction is temporary. As you walk away from Micah's body, as you ride back to your ranch with the money he stole, as you try to build the life Arthur died to give you, you realize that Micah's death doesn't fix anything. It's just one more death in a story full of death. One more act of violence in a world that runs on violence. One more tragedy in a game about tragedy. Micah Bell, the rat, the snake, the betrayer, one of gaming's greatest villains, and a character you'll never forget. Not because you love him, but because you hate him so completely. And that hatred is a testament to how well the character is written, how effectively he's portrayed, how perfectly he serves the story's themes. He's a reminder that evil exists, that it often succeeds, and that fighting it requires sacrifice. He's a warning about manipulation and toxic people, and the cost of misplaced trust. And he's proof that sometimes the most effective villains are the ones who feel real, who remind us of people we've actually met, who show us the darkness that exists not in fantasy worlds but in our own. The game's exploration of Micah as a villain goes beyond simple good versus evil. It examines how evil operates in the real world. Micah doesn't announce himself as a villain. He doesn't wear black and cackle maniacally. He presents himself as loyal, as strong, as someone who understands what it takes to survive. He uses the language of the gang's values against them. When he advocates for violence, he frames it as strength. When he questions others, he frames it as protecting Dutch. When he betrays them, he's already positioned himself as the most loyal member. This is how real manipulation works. Real manipulators don't tell you they're manipulating you. They make you think they're helping you, protecting you, looking out for your best interests. Micah is a master of this. He makes Dutch think that questioning him is the same as questioning Dutch's own judgment. He makes Bill think that following him is the same as being strong. He makes everyone who opposes him seem like the problem. The game also explores how Micah represents the death of the Old West. The Van der Linde gang, for all their flaws, represented a certain ideal. They were outlaws, yes, but they had principles. They didn't kill innocents. They took care of each other. They saw themselves as fighting against a corrupt system. Dutch's philosophy, however flawed, was about freedom and living by your own rules. Micah represents the corruption of that ideal. He's what happens when you strip away all the principles and just keep the violence. He's the outlaw with no code, no honour, no loyalty. He's pure selfishness dressed up in the language of strength. And his success shows how the Old West is dying. The romantic ideal of the noble outlaw can't survive in a world where people like Micah exist. The game uses the contrast between Arthur and Micah to show this. Arthur represents the old way, the outlaw with a code. He's violent, yes, but he has lines he won't cross. He's loyal to his family. He tries to protect the innocent. He questions authority but respects wisdom. Micah represents the new way, the outlaw as pure predator. No code, no loyalty, no lines, just survival and selfishness. Arthur's death and Micah's survival symbolize the death of the Old West. The world doesn't reward honour anymore, it rewards ruthlessness. Arthur dies poor and sick, having given everything for people who didn't appreciate it. Micah survives rich and powerful, having betrayed everyone and gotten away with it, at least for a while. But the game doesn't let Micah's victory stand. 8 years later, justice catches up with him. It's delayed, but it comes. And when it does, Micah dies alone in the snow, unmourned and unloved. The game's message is that even if evil wins in the short term, it ultimately destroys itself. Micah's philosophy of pure selfishness leaves him with nothing. No friends, no family, no legacy, just a frozen corpse in the mountains. The game also uses Micah to explore the concept of the banality of evil. Micah isn't a grand villain with elaborate schemes. He's just a petty, cruel man who takes advantage of every opportunity. He doesn't have a master plan to destroy the gang. He just does what benefits him in the moment, and the cumulative effect is catastrophic. This is often how real evil works. Not through grand schemes, but through countless small acts of selfishness and cruelty. Micah's racism, sexism, and general cruelty aren't part of some elaborate plan. They're just who he is. He's cruel because he enjoys it, because it makes him feel powerful, because he can get away with it. The game shows how this kind of casual evil can be just as destructive as any grand villainy. Micah doesn't need a plan to destroy the gang. He just needs to be himself, and the destruction follows naturally. The relationship between Micah and the player is also interesting. The game forces you to spend time with Micah, to work with him, to tolerate his presence. This creates a unique kind of frustration. You're not just watching a villain from a distance. You're forced to interact with him, to hear his voice, to endure his presence. This makes the hatred more personal, more visceral. When you finally get to kill Micah in the epilogue, it's not just satisfying because he's a villain. It's satisfying because you've personally had to deal with him for dozens of hours. You've heard his voice, endured his comments, watched him destroy everything you care about. His death is personal in a way that most video game villain deaths aren't. The game's writing team deserves credit for creating a villain who's so thoroughly hateable without being one-dimensional. Micah has personality. He has quirks and mannerisms. He's not just the bad guy. He's a fully realized character who happens to be thoroughly evil. This makes him more effective as a villain because he feels real. Peter Blomquist's performance brings Micah to life in a way that makes him unforgettable. The way he delivers Micah's lines, the tone of voice he uses, the subtle inflections that show Micah's manipulation and cruelty, all of it combines to create one of gaming's most memorable villains. You can hear the false friendliness in Micah's voice when he's trying to manipulate someone. You can hear the cruelty when he's mocking someone. You can hear the cowardice when he's faced with real danger. The game's animation team also deserves credit. Micah's body language tells you everything you need to know about him. The way he stands too close to people, invading their personal space. The way he touches his guns constantly, reminding everyone that he's armed and dangerous. The way he smirks when he thinks he's gotten away with something. All of these small details combine to create a character who feels real and threatening. Micah's impact extends beyond the main story. In the epilogue, when you're playing as John and trying to build a normal life, Micah's shadow still looms. The money he stole, the people he killed, the gang he destroyed, all of it still matters. Even dead, Micah's actions have consequences. John's decision to hunt him down, to get revenge, leads directly to John's own death. Micah destroys John's life even from beyond the grave. This is perhaps the most tragic aspect of Micah's character. He doesn't just destroy the gang, he destroys the future. Arthur dies trying to give John a chance at a normal life, but John can't let go of the past. He can't let Micah's betrayal stand. So he goes after him, and in doing so puts himself back on the path that leads to his death. Micah wins even in death, because he drags John down with him. The game uses Micah to explore the cycle of violence that defines the outlaw life. Micah betrays the gang, so John kills Micah, So the Pinkertons come for John, so Jack kills Agent Ross, and the cycle continues. Each act of violence leads to another. Each revenge creates a new grievance. Micah is part of this cycle, but he is also a symbol of it. He represents how violence and betrayal perpetuate themselves, how one evil act creates ripples that spread outward, affecting everyone they touch. The game's final message about Micah is that evil is real, it's dangerous, and it often succeeds. But it's also ultimately empty. Micah gets what he wants in the short term. He gets money, power, and freedom. But he dies alone, hated, and unmourned. His life meant nothing. He built nothing. He created nothing. He just destroyed and consumed until there was nothing left, including himself. Compare this to Arthur, who dies poor and sick but surrounded by love. Arthur's life meant something. He saved people. He helped people. He made the world slightly better, even if only for a few individuals. His death has meaning because he chose to make it meaningful. Micah's death is just the end of a parasite, unmourned and unremembered except as a cautionary tale. The game's treatment of Micah serves as a meditation on what makes a life meaningful. It's not money or power or survival. It's the connections you make, the people you help, the legacy you leave. Micah has none of these things. He's rich when he dies, but his wealth dies with him. He's powerful, but his power evaporates the moment he's gone. He survives longer than Arthur, but his survival is meaningless because he has nothing worth living for. This is the game's ultimate judgment on Micah Bell. Not that he's evil, though he is. Not that he's a traitor, though he is. But that his life is meaningless. He's a void, a black hole that consumes everything around it and produces nothing. He's the opposite of creation, the opposite of meaning, the opposite of life. He's just destruction and emptiness wearing human skin. Red Dead Redemption 2 uses Micah Bell to explore some of the darkest aspects of human nature. The capacity for betrayal, the appeal of cruelty, the seduction of selfishness, the danger of charisma without conscience. Micah embodies all of these things, and the game forces you to confront them. You can't ignore Micah. You can't skip his scenes. You have to deal with him, have to watch him destroy everything, have to feel the frustration and anger and helplessness of watching evil succeed. And then finally you get to kill him. And it's satisfying, but it's also hollow. Because by the time you kill Micah, the damage is done. The gang is destroyed. Arthur is dead. The future is compromised. Micah's death doesn't fix anything. It just ends one chapter of a tragedy that will continue long after he's gone. This is what makes Micah Bell such an effective villain. He's not just a character you defeat. He's a force that shapes the entire story, that influences every character, that drives the tragedy forward. He's the catalyst, the infection, the poison, and even when he's gone, his effects linger. The game doesn't let you forget Micah Bell. His shadow falls across the entire story, from the moment he appears to long after he's dead. Micah Bell is a reminder that evil is real, that it exists in the world, and that it often wears a friendly face. He's a warning about the dangers of manipulation, about the importance of trusting your instincts, about the cost of misplaced loyalty. He's a character study in sociopathy, in how someone without conscience operates in the world. And he's a perfectly crafted villain who serves every aspect of the story he's in. When you finish Red Dead Redemption 2, you remember Arthur's redemption, you remember Dutch's fall, and you remember Micah's betrayal. These three elements define the story, and Micah is essential to all of them. He's the villain who makes Arthur's heroism meaningful, who enables Dutch's corruption, who drives the tragedy forward. Without Micah, the story doesn't work. With him, it's one of the greatest tragedies in gaming. Good night.